Hello and welcome back to Life with Collective Purpose. And we have Beth all the way from Israel. And Beth wrote a really fascinating chapter in our book, Journey to Authenticity. And I'm going to let Beth introduce herself, and then we're going to talk about how she uses music in her family therapy. And then how that helps with authenticity. So, Beth, welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
And it's wonderful to have you. And we had a great chat with one of the other authors just before we started recording. So it's always wonderful that we can connect with you all the way in Israel. And I know that that can be very stressful where you're living right now. Beth, tell us a little bit about you and what you do and what is your practice of family therapy?
Okay, I am Beth Nemesh, and I am both a family therapist and I work within the Satir model, which is an experiential family therapy model. And on my other hat, I'm expressive art therapist, and my major is in music, although I do use all the arts when I work. And most of my clients are families, and they can be families with children or children with special needs, and many teenagers and their parents, some couple therapy and individual therapy, but mostly families. So that's where I use my interventions and my experience with the families are mostly experiential musical interventions that are meant for bringing the family into a place where they are healthy, functional, and have good communication and dynamics between them.
And it's beautiful the way that you express in your chapter in the book, because you talk about a particular family that you were working with and how the work that you did with that family really helped you in your own healing journey with your own family. And that was all done with the use of musical instruments that are used as a metaphor for the different characters and the different relationships within a family. So, Beth, tell us a little bit about the piano story, because that to me is a really great way of introducing to our audience what does it mean to use musical instruments in family therapy?
So this is about a young client that came with she's a musician, but she could not perform her music. And she came because she was stuck and she was not sure why and what to do with it. She came to me as a music therapist because she thought I could understand her better. So from her story, I understood that a lot of her history was connected to this being stuck experience. And what we did is try to recreate her family dynamics using musical instruments and her auditory memories from her family. And what we actually do is I asked her to choose an instrument that would stand for each one of her parents. And there is a lot of unconscious, intuitive work when we choose an instrument for each one of the family members. Some of it is cognitive and you understand why, but some of it, or a lot of the information given through the instrument and the way it is played or held and its sound gives us more information about this experience, which is a very early experience in her life, where there are less words and cognitive memories, and the memories are more from the experience, from the body, and from the auditory memories. So through the experience of the musical instruments, we can recreate her family story between her parents, and see what happened to her as a child that impacted her today as a grown-up, and that she could not move forward without resolving. And well, I'll tell you about the piano part because you asked. She chose the piano for her mom as to represent her mother. And it was an amazing because it's the biggest instrument in the room. And it takes up a lot of space, and it could be very loud. It could be also very melodic. It could be having a lot of sense of rhythm. So it could have a lot going on in a whole piano as a parent. And apparently her piano was broken, and she could not hear or play the music on the piano. And that reflected her mother, her broken mother, who had the potential of being melodic and being rhythmic and being very important in the room, but was actually a helpless instrument that needed healing itself. And through that experience and understanding, she could really tap into her empathy and love and kindness towards her mother instead of the judgments she had. She was very angry. Her mother was not there for her as a child. And through that metaphor and experience and the musical numbness of the piano, she could understand how her numbness became part of her, and what she learned in the family of origin of how to react and how to cope and how to manage conflicts. Then she learned from her mother, and she actually repeated the same ways of coping. So they had the same dynamics with between them and others. Is about closing up, shutting down, and running away. And then it was a wonderful experience of really understanding her child experience, and then sending a lot of love and compassion towards her mom. And she wrote songs about for both her parents, but her mom's was about really forgiveness and healing and letting go of all the anger and frustration she had towards her, and changing it with compassion. And that was the part of the musical instrument that actually represented her mom.
That's what an interesting way of helping somebody to kind of unconsciously go into those feelings from childhood by telling that story through the story of a musical instrument that's the grand piano, which is grand and it takes up a lot of space, but because it's broken, then it has that, it doesn't have the ability to be all that it could be. And so it's almost like the story is like saying, oh, I forgive you, piano, because you can't play as beautifully as you should be as a piano, or as you should be as a mother, for example, because you're broken. So I mean, that's such a beautiful metaphor, and what a beautiful way to help people to understand those dynamics. Now, in this instance, and you talk about this in the book, this also raised for you your own dynamics of your own family. So can you explain how this reciprocal benefit of you having this awareness with this client, how that then came into your life and actually creating your own musical therapy for yourself and your own dynamics?
So there were some parallels between her story and my story. And when I've never done this family musical sculpting before, that was the first experience I had with it. I wasn't sure it was going to work or it would have a lot of impact or therapeutic impact, or at least I hoped it would, but I wasn't sure because I've never done it or anybody else. So family musical sculpting was kind of an invention that I decided to try out on her and see if it worked, how it worked, and what was the advantage of using that way of musical reconstruction of a family. So once she finished or completed her therapeutic journey with me, and I decided that if it worked so well for her, and then I did it for other people, then I would try to do my own family musical sculpting and reconstruction. And I kind of put it off for a while. I wasn't sure about me doing it for myself, and I couldn't ask anybody else because I wouldn't know what to do or how to do it. So I had to rely on my own intuition and skill and some expertise I've learned through my clients. And then I've actually started doing it, and I chose instruments to represent both of my parents and for me. And then I tried to understand the choice, and I tried to understand the dynamics and the meaning of the dynamics. What actually happened, Julie, was first of all, the metaphors were already there. Like I had the metaphors anyway. I didn't need to think about them. I think they were the metaphors I had for my parents as a child. That's how I saw them as very young child, and they've never changed. Like I could just say, okay, I know what my choice will be. And so this is where I know that our unconscious musical memories and auditory memories, which are very, very young, before we start speaking, are very strong, and they don't leave us. They're unconscious. But when you have the trigger or the door or the key to the door, and then you can actually access those memories and experience in a very accurate way. And I think most importantly is not just the accuracy, but when you use musical interventions, it doesn't go through your censorship, because your censorship is in a different place in your brain. You could censor your words because they're cognitives and it comes from your cognitive brain, but music comes from a different part and the censor is in a different part. And the censor has absolutely no power over the musical impact. That's why it's very strong, and that's why it's very immediate. So it's not good for everybody, because you can fall apart and just break down because it might be too much. Wow. So not all people will benefit. And for some people, it will be too much or too strong or too fast because the impact is immediate. There's no way to stop the musical impact. The minute it's there, it's there. It hits your heart and your body, and your brain can't stop it because it's already been done. So you do it very cautiously with those people who are ripe and ready for the journey, and you have a good relationship and a very trusting one. Right. And that they can really trust you to hold them in this journey of unveiling all the pain and probably memories that are suppressed, sometimes like repressed, sometimes it's easier just to forget about them instead of dealing with them. But when they come up, you cannot undo it. They're
Right.
there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's very impactful, very strong, very immediate. The aha moments about awareness of new information is very strong, very accurate. And when I ask my clients about how accurate does this describe your experience and your dynamics in your childhood, it's really one-on-one, like exactly. Like,
Wow.
so what I do is I try to create a dialogue to understand the dynamics between a parent and a child, or between two parents or different siblings. You actually create a musical dialogue between them. You play
Wow.
together. And
Wow.
then you have these two instruments. And then through the connection between the instruments and the harmony or disharmony or dissonance that comes up there, you can understand a lot about the relationships and the dynamics and what meaning it had for you as a child. How did you perceive that dynamic? And then your coping. How did you cope with that knowledge as a child? And now, as a grown up, first of all, the awareness, and then the idea that this coping is still what you do. It hasn't changed because you have not changed it. And then to see other options. It's an opportunity to see that you don't need to react the same way you did it when you were a child. So you can choose a better, more healthy way of coping with this same dynamic. So you
Right.
don't repeat the same, run away, close up, shut down, become angry, etc. And then you could choose, okay, what do I want to do differently? And then you
Right.
have a choice.
It's so liberating when you understand the unconscious behaviors from your childhood and how they are affecting you in your adulthood, and how
Yeah.
that keeps repeating, like you say, that intergenerational trauma where it just passes down from each generation. And a lot of people are so unconsciously aware that how they're reacting or how they're behaving in relationship is because of some trauma that your mother had or some trauma that your grandmother had. And yet it keeps repeating and repeating. I mean, I know certainly I wish I had musical therapy, a musical therapist to help me discover what I discovered a lot later in life. But I realized my relationship with my father, I always thought of him as that very loud, angry, instrument, and always dominating everything, dominating everybody. And always, you had to listen, not only listen, but that was the only version that was correct. And so the whole band needed to go in line with this particular instrument because it was so loud and so and so dominant. And that's how I would describe my father. And my mother is probably playing the little tin whistle and completely and totally drowned out by his big instrument. So she's never got a voice, she's never heard, and she's always completely dominated. And me then realizing that I was also that little tin whistle, and choosing men in my relationships that also did that they shout, they always wanted to shout. They would shout at me, and then immediately I would feel like I didn't have a voice. And and it's so interesting, and you go through that it just keeps repeating itself, and then suddenly at some point you like go, hang on a minute, this relationship's exactly the same as the one before, and wow, don't they all remind me of my father? So right, so I can see how this type of therapy, Beth, would just bring this unconscious behavior really very, very quick, like you say, instantaneous, like awareness of like, oh my goodness, this is repeating over and over and over again. So tell, if you don't mind sharing, because I know you do in your chapter in the book, what was the representation of your family dynamics in terms of the instruments that represented your family?
So my mother was a horn, and my father was flute, like a flute that was played with a lot of wind, not a how do you say that, metal flute, wooden flute. And the dynamics, and I was a guitar. And what would you know, I'll just give you an example of what would you could think that between me and my father, there would be a lot of compatibility because they're both very soft and melodic instruments. So if you have like a pan flute and a guitar, then they're both melodic, they're both soft, they all both have a lot of heart and depth to their sound. But when I realized, like, okay, first of all, I could actually see different characteristics of my father in that flute. But what surprised me was the dynamics between him and me, that there were no, cooperation between our two instruments. Like, theoretically, it could work. But in my memories, all I could feel and remember was how I could not join him on his melody because had no steady beat. He would be all over the place. He would be very difficult to follow and to join. As a child, I definitely couldn't because it was so jumbled. And he wouldn't join me because he would not listen to me. He listened only to himself. And what I realized is that he actually takes my guitar and plays it instead of me and showing me how things should be done. This is the way you should. And it kind of disempowers, if that's a right word in English, and takes your strength from you, and you're left with nothing because it was kind of all about himself and what I can do, and I can do it right.
Right.
And then it gives, everything your parents do, every word or gesture or every tone of voice or every action a parent takes and shows you as a child gives the child some message about who they are and their self-worth. And this is how we make sense of the world and about relationships. And when you have a relationship that does not give the child validation and acceptance and a feeling that they're worthy, then the outcome would be someone that does not have a feeling of self-worth. Not good enough because I'm not doing it right. I'm doing it wrong, and I have to learn how to do it right. And if I were a placating child, then I would bow my head and go along and become a very small, like you said, tin whistle. But if, on the other hand, my personality was a more, conflicting one, and I was a fighter.
Yes.
So I did not allow that to happen because I had a feeling that if I went that way, and I had a good sister that went in the placating way, so if I went that way, I would lose myself.
Mm.
And for some reason, as a very young child, I could figure out that I did not want to do that. It
Yes.
was for me to live or to die. Like I have to go against him. And he was a very popular person. So it was very unusual for someone to go against him. It took me a lot of years to be able to to defy that
Yes.
that hold on me, and to really put out what I really think about him and feel about him, and to really be able to say that in a way that, you know, it's wrong. It's wrong to let your kids feel so bad about themselves. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of parents today, even today, I must say, think that if you tell how bad you are, child, if you tell the child how bad and wrong they are, they will improve their ways.
Mm.
But actually, it's the opposite. If you tell a child how bad and wrong they are, they just become sadder and more depressed and think they are bad and wrong. And their self-worth goes
Oh,
down.
just a minute. Ah. So you were just saying, Beth, that, you know, it's the opposite of what we expect. So, you know, as adults, we think that, you know, when the parents are giving us that message that we're, you know, that we're doing something wrong, or we don't realize that stays with us right into our adulthood, right?
And parents don't realize the messages that they're actually giving their children with this criticism about who they are and what they're doing and their behavior. And I think this is where we come as new age therapists,
Mm-hmm.
really teaching that positivity and encouragement gives the children incentive to become better.
Mm-hmm.
And they children are molded by their families of origin and where they grow up, and they repeat the same patterns. And then what we teach them is what they know, and when they go out into the world, they repeat their parents' ways and behaviors and copings and patterns, and that could go on for generation after generation.
So
So
you're
to
actually, what you're really doing, Beth, is you're putting a stop to that. You are bringing a very a method using musical instruments to bring an awareness that will change that, and that will actually change not only for you, the client that is having that awareness, but for your children and for your children's children. Is actually is that opportunity to put a stop to that intergenerational trauma. So what you're doing with this type of therapy is completely unique. And I know that we've had quite a few people talking about intergenerational trauma and how that really impacts us, and we have no idea how much it impacts us. In fact, Sylvia is also in this book, and we're going to be she'll also be interviewed about how the trauma of the war, you know, that because she was she's German, so even though she wasn't personally involved in the war herself, her parents and her grandparents, all of that trauma really impacted her way more than she realized. And so it's really fascinating that you have found this method of therapy that just really, it just gives those awareness. Like, really amazing. How did you discover this, Beth? How did you discover this type of therapy?
I don't know. It was there. It just makes sense because family sculpting is intervention and that Virginia Satir used a lot with really placing people physically in different postures to recreate their families. And for me, because I come from music and my memories are musical and auditory, there's no reason why it shouldn't work with the instruments as representations of their family. And it gives more information. It gives a lot of unconscious extra
Mhm.
information, which
Mhm.
makes it more unique.
Wow.
But the impact is very, very swift. And look, you have repeated your mother as being a small whistle, and she probably repeated her mother and then grandmother. And this is how women were. But
Yes.
you've made a change. You're not a whistle anymore, right? So you would be choosing yourself. I say, so what instrument would you be using to describe yourself now? Is Julianne the grown up, right? And then I would look at the characteristics of that new instrument and how does it sound and what
Mm.
vibrate and what's the magical part of it and how does it interact with other instruments around
Mm.
you. So that would be the change. I would be working through the change by changing who you are as your instrument and how it sounds and what are your new choices. Some families actually change the whole instrument and choose a different one, and others just change the way the instrument is played. Like you can retune your piano or your guitar, you could play louder or faster or stronger or whatever. And if you do a change for your father, which takes up so much room and so loud, maybe you will still be in the same instrument, but maybe softer. Maybe he would change an instrument, be something else. So we would
I think
choice.
I would definitely stop being a tin whistle, and I'd probably be like a saxophone, you know, with my own rhythm.
Right. My own rhythm, right. So this is the first characteristics you're saying. Now I am my own rhythm. And
Hmm.
that is empowerment and independence and your free choice to be who you are and not
Hmm.
what you should be or expected to be or learn from your family of origin, what you should and how women should, etc., etc. So
Hmm.
that's a huge change. And there's a lot of added characteristics for the saxophone, of course, but we're not going to go into that. But, the idea is that once you go through the process of healing, you have more options to choose how you want to define yourself. I
Hmm.
am no longer the broken piano. I'm no longer the broken or the untuned guitar or the guitar that doesn't even play
Hmm.
because nobody is willing to play on the strings, right? So the only thing I have to change is to play. I have everything I need, and now I have the will to play the guitar. So I don't necessarily have to change the instrument, but it would be a different way of using the same instrument.
Wow.
So this is one intervention, one experience of family musical sculpting, which made sense to me
Hmm.
and as both a family therapist and a music therapist, and knowing Virginia Satir's work and doing a lot of family sculpting, like the conventional way,
Right.
then came the unconventional way. And then I could see the added value of adding music and also all the arts. All the arts, they don't go through the censorship. They are
Hmm.
a different part and they bring up spontaneous knowledge from the unconscious.
This is just a fascinating subject, and I feel like I could just talk to you for hours, Beth. But we are coming to the end of our time. How do our viewers get to engage with you, get to find out more about what you do, what is the best way of people getting hold of you, Beth?
Well, they could look into my website, which I think is mostly up to date, and find more information about me. They can always write to me. My website is Beth Nemesh, which is my name. And then also my Gmail is bethnemesh@gmail.com. And I think that's the easiest way, and it's just straightforward.
Yes, that and easy to remember, bethnemesh.com or bethnemesh@gmail.com. That's perfect. Nice and easy.
I'm probably the only Beth Nemesh probably in the world, but
I would
maybe
guess
it is.
so. I would guess so because you're
And if there's
totally
extra
unique.
ones, music therapist and family therapist, Beth Nemesh is probably the only one.
That's wonderful. And thank you so much for your time. I know that everyone is going to really enjoy reading your chapter in this book, The Journey to Authenticity, and discovering how they can perhaps identify with their own musical instrument and go from there on a beautiful journey. So thank you once again for your time, and we will be seeing you soon, Beth, very soon, I know.
It's wonderful being here and talking to you.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye-bye.